Playing a Souls game blind is the most wonderful experience I can't recommend enough. You never know what item you are going to find around the corner, how magic works and what weapon is more powerful or less, and what is going to eat you. Because picking the correct class without having no idea of what is going to happen, it is something that tortures all players. Elden Ring is out this week, and this guide is for those players that want to go in without knowing absolutely nothing about Elden Ring, not even the starter classes. Although if you know, looking online can help. But this video is about going 100% blind. All this is based on my knowledge as a 100% blind player for every single Soul game since Demon's Souls, and after all of them I know how they work and can predict the class I should pick, and no regret from now until New Game 7. Of course, since all this is generic, this will also apply to future and past Soul games you are going blind. Games are still very well designed to give you decent weapons and armor for all characters, and all weapons are viable to complete the game. Still, it is a very rare thing that you are going to keep using the same weapon for all the game long. That would be very boring, and same with the armor. Besides, the starter weapons and armor can be usually found very early in each game, so it is never an issue picking a class with the wrong weapon. With spellcasters in a similar way, they start with the weakest spell in the classes, and talismans can be found early. When going blind, going spellcaster is a very risky business. Spellcasters are as good as the spells you can find, and the best spells are usually very well hidden. Mages in particular are a lot more impacted for this than cleric types. Cleric types have the blessing or curse that you usually can't go pure spellcaster, but you usually use a lot of a side weapon. Mages' spell advantage is that can make early content easier with strong ranged power, and if finding the correct spells can make end content also easier. But it is a gamble you must decide. If you want to try magic but don't want to risk it, there are always classes with middle intelligence but more gifted in starter equipment and stats. If you aren't going spellcaster, then the choice is more complicated. You always get half a dozen options of hitting the enemy face with a sharp or blunt instrument. Most people, when picking these classes, usually look at the highest stats of the class. But that is an error in the long run. Starting with a high stat is not good at all because you are stuck into it regardless of what you find. Imagine you go into your typical brute character with a lot of strength, and the early weapons you find are all quality or dex based, including that ultra cool halberd that scales with dex and almost no strength. Because of that, those extra points in strength become wasted investment, and you will lag some levels before you can equip it, since you must invest on skill. So be wary of starter classes with very high dexterity or strength unless you are totally committed to devoting your build into them regardless of what you find. On the other hand, high starting vigor or stamina are never wasted. You will end leveling these anyways, yes or yes. Vitality is especially good because plainly and in a very noticeable way makes the games easier, allowing you to survive mistakes. Yes, there are people out there able to clear the whole thing without any vitality and framing everything, but if you are watching this, you aren't one of those. The stamina stats can be one or split in two, and one is the equipment load you can have and the other is the number of actions you can do without stopping depending on the game. And both are ultra useful to have high. So, the ideal blind character is using a lot of vitality or stamina and not much strength or dexterity. And then, the thing you should be really looking at instead of the highest stats are the lowest ones. A stat always can be raised by many means, but a stat never can be lowered. Even in these games with the option to reroll your character, you must keep your starting class and stats, and you can't get any lower. Imagine that after 50 hours of playing you find a lot of cool spells and want to go mage. Well, since you started as a knight with 16 strength, you are now stuck with a helluva of bad stats you can't fix, and your mage will always be worse than one that picked the lousy stats. This is the main reason why the deprived class is a popular pick for veteran soul players. It is not only because it is some kind of hard mode because your nakedness will be fixed very early, but because they don't have any high stat and they start at the lowest possible level. This allows them to be flexible early game, adapting their build to the equipment they find without compromise. And in the case they want to reroll, the amount of dead stats will be minimum. Going naked is good. But on the other hand, it is neither optimal. Imagine you are 100% sure you don't want to cast mage spells or faith spells or no spell at all. You can see that there are classes with less stats in these than deprived get. So, if you are going pure melee, picking the class with the least faith and intelligence is the most intelligent thing to do. This is especially smart because when going blind you don't know if the game has buff spells to weapons and if they are good at all. You can wait with both low faith and intelligence, and once a good spell shows up, raise that stat. Attunement stat usefulness is hard to know in advance. In general, you will end with one form of spellcasting or another, so getting a mid-value of about 10 points is good. That universally is the least you need to be able to cast anything. And finally there are the wild card weird stats like luck, blood tinger or adaptability that only makes sense if you have read a guide. Because of that, be wary of these and keep them down. Luck in particular usually only serves to boost your drop rates or maybe to make a status effect more powerful. So these are better treated as wait and see stats. Keep them as low as possible until you see they are worth anything. If you keep them low at the start, once you can rebirth you can remove all the points once drop rates don't matter anymore because you got the perfect equipment. If you put all this advice into practice you will find yourself with several extra stat points, and those can make a big difference in the early and late game. Especially in player versus player, having squeezed 6 extra skill points means that you have an edge over your opponent equivalent in levels. You will be a level 130 character fighting a level 120, and when fighting someone with the same skill level you will make a difference. And with all this, you are ready for Elden Ring or whatever without frustrations of picking the wrong class. Go on and have fun regardless of what you pick.